Welcome to Shoe Time in the Morning
with Mitch.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another beautiful episode of Shoe Time in the Morning with Mitch. We are here, we are there, we are everywhere. Hope you're doing well out there. We are learning about the muscles of the body. Remember last time we talked about the abdominal muscles. The correct scientific terminology is rectus abdominis. All right? The rectus abdominis are twofold. They help us protect our internal organs as well as bend at the spine. But if we were bent at the spine and we had nothing to pull us back up, we'd walk around like this all day. So there is a set of muscles that oppose the rectus abdominis that help us stand straight up or stand erect. And the name of those muscles is the erector spinae. All right? The spine is what's being straightened. And which way is it being straightened? So you stand erect. The erector spinae. All right? That is the opposing muscles of the abs that helps your body stand straight up. All right? Now, just the same way that we can work our abdominal muscles, all right, by doing a plethora of exercises such as the leg lift or the plank or a crunch or any number of exercises, we can also work our erector spinae by doing a number of exercises, but a little bit more challenging. So, one exercise that we like to do for the erector spinae is if you lay down flat on your stomach, you can lift your spine as far as you can go while keeping your body straight. And you're going to feel that in your spine, and especially your lower spine, your erector spinae. Or you can do a reverse leg lift.
Oh.
Reverse leg lift, you're going to feel that right in your lower back. Now, some of you guys complain about lower back pain. Why? Because you may work your abs in sit-ups and other exercises, but you don't work your erector spinae. And so you have what's called a little bit of an imbalance. So you have more of a pull front instead of a pull backwards. So, remember, everything we do, we want to have balance in our muscles. And the majority of muscles we have muscles that work in opposition to another set of muscles. Easily demonstrated on our arm. What's the name of the muscle on the top of our arm that bends or flexes the arm at the bicep or at the elbow? It is the bicep, all right? That bends or flexes the arm, and then the opposing on the backside, tricep, then would straighten the arm. Same principle for our abdominal muscles, which bend at the spine, and the erector spinae, which help us sit or stand upright. Now, what good is it to have a strong core? Well, everything we do, we have to keep our spine braced, all right? Our spine is the support for our entire torso, the entire upper part of our body. So, if we were to lift something heavy, or we're wearing our backpacks, when you wear your backpack, your spine is having a load on it. Now, the stability of force between your abdominal muscles and your erector spinae is what allows you to stay perfectly upright. If one is weaker than the other, you're going to be pulled in the direction of whatever muscle is weaker. So you want to stand straight up and be perfectly spinally neutral. You have to have good core strength. Additionally, if we were to do other exercises like the squat or like the overhead press, all right? We're lifting weight over our head. We still need to maintain a tight core so we have a neutral spine, all right? You only get one spine, and guys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, if you injure that spine, it's one of the worst injuries that a human can ever undertake. It could lead to paralysis, which means you'll never be able to walk or move again in certain parts of your body. So it is highly important that you have balanced and strong muscles to develop a strong core to keep your spine neutral and safe at all times. Well, who would have a strong spine? Well, everyone everyone should have a strong spine. All of you guys have backpacks. All of you guys do exercises where you stand straight up. All of you guys move. It doesn't matter if you're in the band and you play a tuba, or if you are a drummer that stands straight up and playing and moving. You need to have clear movement. If you're an athlete, a football player, a gymnast, a swimmer, you name it, you need to have the ability to maintain a nice, neutral spine. Mr. Moore-Henry?
Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Shoemate, you mentioned something a couple moments ago, the balance between your stomach muscles and your back muscles, your abs and your rectus spinae. And I'm guilty of that. I'll work more on my frontal core, if you will, than my back. Matter of fact, I was telling you yesterday, I believe, I was doing some erector spinae type exercises, some extension exercise. Hadn't done it in a while, Mr. Mitchell. The next day, I couldn't work out. I was that sore. My lower back was that sore. I really couldn't understand why. And I started sharing this with Mr. Shoemaker, and he said, well, that's because you probably have weaker muscles in your back. Ding, ding, ding. I wasn't balancing those muscles. So, by the way, guess what I'm doing right now, guys? I'm doing gut. I'm flexing my gut. You can't even tell because I look like a fat man. But I am flexing I'm flexing my gut right now. I'm working my gut while we're doing this video. You can do the same thing. But that balance that you mentioned is very important. I'm convicted of that, and I want to start balancing those muscles better. And I like the example, too. You got the bicep and the tricep. They balance one another. They work opposite one another. So you want to keep that balance in your mind and continue to work both aspects of the opposite muscles.
Yeah, I agree. I sit there and when you guys are doing those yoga videos and I ask you what is the hardest position, so many of my kids were saying the three-legged dog. And I was, what was the problem with the three-legged dog? And all of you were saying balance. Your core, locking in that core. It's so important for balance as well as anything else. And talking about lower back, I was watching you guys do bird dogs, you know, and that's a beautiful, beautiful position for not only your core, but for your lower back also. So keep doing those bird dogs also.
I got a question for you guys. We've had a number of questions on these videos, and the question today is your favorite sports person, not now, but your favorite sports person when you're growing up. And who was that person? What did they play? Why were they your favorite sports person growing up? Or you could say your favorite role model. Who did you look up to? Mr. Mitchell?
Well, you know, you guys are at an age right now, when I was your age, all we did was play sports. There were no computers. There were no cell phones. There were no video games. And so what did a kid do who was 11, 12, 13 years old? They played sports. They played sports all day long. They played sports until it was dark and they couldn't see. They sometimes played sports even in the dark with flashlights or getting underneath lights where they could find them. They played sports. I played sports as late as I could every day. And obviously, I like sports, and that's kind of why I'm a PE teacher. So if you played sports all the time as a kid, then you would try and play sports like those athletes that you watched on TV, those pros, those professional athletes. And those professional athletes, they had different athletes for different sports that were considered almost godlike. They were so good. And so when I think about athletes, I think about sports. And when I think about the different sports for me, I think about baseball. And when I was a kid growing up, there was a center fielder for the New York Yankees, and his name was Mickey Mantle. And Mickey Mantle to me was like a god. He was considered the best switch-hitting hitter ever. He was, at one point before he got hurt, he was one of the fastest baseball players ever. And so people like Mickey Mantle, they had thousands and thousands of kids my age when I was young, all cheering for him. And we used to trade baseball cards of Mickey Mantle. And everyone used to collect baseball cards in the neighborhood. And you'd swap like 3 Tony Kubricks for 1 Mickey Mantle if you were lucky. Or you'd do 2 Roger Marises for a Mickey Mantle. And there's constantly kids were like trading baseball cards at school all the time. And then I would think football. And everybody played football in my neighborhood. We'd go down to the park and we'd choose up teams, and we'd have tons of kids. We'd play 11-on-11 games with just the neighborhood kids. And so you thought about the great football stars when you were a kid. And I immediately thought of Joe Namath. I grew up in New York. Mickey Mantle was a Yankee. Joe Namath was a New York Jet. Jets were incredibly bad for a long, long time. And then they got Joe Namath. And Joe Namath was a quarterback with just a golden arm. And he was the one in Super Bowl III who guaranteed that the New York Jets would win the Super Bowl. Guaranteed it. And they were like 20-point underdogs. But sure enough, they won Super Bowl III. So he was a god to me. And then you think about basketball. We played basketball all night long. We played basketball. Basketball was one of the things where they had street lights and they had park lights where you could play at night. And we played basketball, and everyone wanted to be like the New York Knicks. Because I lived in New York, so the New York Knicks had a great team. In 1969, they won the NBA championship. And their starting guard was named Walt Frazier. And Walt Frazier, and they had another guard named Earl the Pearl Monroe. And these two guards, they were unbelievable what they could do with a basketball. So I have to say, Walt Frazier was basketball, Joe Namath was football, Mickey Mantle was baseball. And those are my three favorite sports, so those are my stars.
Mr. Shoemaker, how about you?
Well, when you put it like Mr. Mitchell put it, absolutely right. When I was a young man, we watched and played sports consistently, constantly, and that has lasted into my adulthood. And like Mr. Mitchell, I was a fan and a player of many different sports. So if I had to go along the lines, I liked different athletes for different reasons. Some was just the impressiveness of their performance, and some was just their overall likability and good nature. I think if I had to go with my favorite, I'm going to go with the most influential athlete on me, the person who inspired the most awe throughout my childhood. And I grew up at a time where boxing was still highly embraced and one of the #1 sports in this country.
Oh, the heavyweights, the heavyweights.
And I would say, when I was growing up, the man who inspired the most awe, the most fear, the most respect out of anyone on the planet was a man named Iron Mike Tyson. Now, many of you know Mike Tyson now as an actor in a certain movie, or he's a comedian, he tells jokes here and there. But let me tell you, ask any adult male, any person on the planet, if they bumped into Mike Tyson, and they would be scared, you know what, if they were in Mike Tyson's path and he was on a war path.
He was an animal.
He was an animal. So Mike Tyson, to me, was the epitome of champion boxer. When I was a kid, we're talking specifically when I was your age, Mike Tyson was the man. So that was probably the most respected athlete of my generation, probably in conjunction with Michael Jordan, but I'm a boxing fan, #1, so Mike Tyson. With football, I played football many years. I love football. I would say my favorite football athlete. I am a Steelers fan, but I give credit where credit is due. And I like the Los Angeles Raiders at the time as well. They were kind of my second favorite team there. The athlete that I liked the most was a guy named Bo Jackson. Vincent Edward Bo Jackson was one of the few people to ever make an all-star game in both football and baseball. He played baseball as well. He was a phenomenal athlete. He ran a 4.140 for you guys out there that are familiar with the 40 time. And he was probably have been the best running back of all time had he not gotten hurt. But it's a strange story. He was so strong that he got hurt doing something that would have been a normal play for most people. He was so strong, he was running and someone tackled him from behind, and he planted his foot to make a cut because he was so strong. Instead of him going down, he kept himself up and he pushed his femur bone through his hip socket and injured himself. But he was never quite the same and never played football again after that, but he would have been one of the best running backs. Barry Sanders, in my opinion, is the best running back of all time. And last but not least, for baseball, I'm going to take it back a little before my time for a man I respect. For my favorite baseball team, which is the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think one of the classiest and one of the best baseball players ever to do it, and certainly the baseball player with the best arm, not from a pitching standpoint, but the best arm, being able to throw people out from the wall at home plate in one throw without bouncing, no cutoff man, would be a man named Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente was a great baseball player for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He had 3,000 hits. When he died, he was going to help a group of people in Nicaragua with an earthquake. They had a major earthquake and they needed some aid, and he loaded up a couple of planes with goods and things to go out and help with the aid. And they took off from the airplane in Puerto Rico, and the plane unfortunately had an engine problem and crashed into the ocean, and he died while still fresh in his playing career, but one of the best athletes I've ever seen.
All right, guys, well, I'm going to tell you my 3 role model athletes. But before I do, purple square. Find the purple square somewhere in here. I'm going to go over my biggest role models from 3 sports as well. So the first sport I'm going to mention will be baseball, football, and then boxing. All right, baseball in the 80s, Atlanta Braves, Glenn Hubbard. Now, Glenn Hubbard was one of my role models. He's a person I grew up enjoying watching on TV because I think he was a lot like me, short and squatty. Short and squatty. Remember that song, Short and Squatty, Short and Spotty, Short and Spotty, Short and Spotty. Now, the way this guy hit the ball, he hit with a little power, not a lot. He was more of a slap hitter, but the bat he used looked this big. And he was just a strong hitter that hit for a decent average. But one thing I really liked about Glenn Hubbard was the way he turned double plays. He would turn double plays very smoothly and quickly. And that was before they really had sliding rules. Nowadays, you got to slide, you baseball players and softball players, you know this. You got to slide right into the base. You can't go to the right or left, or you'll automatically be called out and it'll be called a double play. Back then, you could take out the infielder. You could slide into him. Well, Glenn Hubbard turned double plays no matter if King Kong was sliding in. Next, my favorite football player growing up, my role model, the person I liked watching most, was Terry Metcalf. Terry Metcalf played for the Cardinals of St. Louis. They're now called the Phoenix Cardinals, but they were back then called the St. Louis Cardinals. He was number 21. He was just smooth as butter out the microwave. Smooth as butter out the microwave. He was quick, agile, and he had some power. Now, Terry Metcalf had a son that came after him in the NFL, the National Football League, and he was predominantly a punt returner or a kick returner, although he did play some other offensive positions. But in his decade, he was probably one of the top return guys. You guys remember?
Eric Metcalf.
Eric Metcalf. He also wore number 21, just like his father. So when we play like Kill the Guy, we play football games, I would always want to be Terry Metcalf. And sometimes I would choose Eric Metcalf as well. Lastly, my favorite boxer. My favorite boxer was none other than Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard. I saw a couple interviews he did. One interview he said at the end of the later rounds in his fights, he would like to exchange a lot of punches. And he said he did that to sway the judges. To sway the judges. He said he wanted to finish each round well. Another interview I saw him do is right after he fought Roberto Duran, which he lost to, remember the first time? And I'll never forget this, guys. Sugar Ray Leonard said to the interviewer, as he looked into the camera, the stage was too big for me at that time. He said I was overwhelmed by the lights, by the interviews, by the situation going on. And he said he lost focus. Now, he did fight Roberto Duran again. That's interesting. Do the research on that, because that's a big, iconic sports moment, that second fight with Roberto Duran and how that turned out. But I'll never forget that one of the persons I looked up to said, this situation is just too big for me. Now, I've been in that situation too. different aspects of my life. You guys too?
Okay.
It happens to everyone. And here's the point I'm making. Role models are good to have. We should have people we could look up to. It's okay to try to be like them, but don't try to be them because you can't. Be yourself, because no one can make a better you than you. You know, Mr. Shoemate, Mr. Mitchell, that reminds me of a song. You light up my life.
What the world is going on here? What are we doing here? Why are we here?
Well, we're here to build healthy relationships.
What's the purpose of Bret Hart?
HR squared.
Honesty, respect, responsibility. Guys, remember, keep on pushing and try to be a better you today than you were yesterday. Keep on pushing. Push on 3. 1, 2, 3. Push!